this is Kelly Jean with Adult and Teen Services over at the new Lenox Library, and welcome. Tonight we're going to show you how to make a walking pumpkin pie. If you've ever been to one of my other maker programs, you know I always have 3 goals. Make something, learn something, and have fun. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I welcome you to join me as we put together a walking pumpkin pie. The concept of a walking pie is based on a walking taco, as I grew up calling them, also sometimes called a walking Frito pie. And they're usually made with a bag of Fritos or some kind of corn chip. And then you add your meat or chili and then all your toppings like sour cream and cheese and green onions right into the bag and then eat it right out the bag. So it's a great party food or street food, and it's portable and on the go. So we're going to take that concept and make it dessert. So we're going to be inspired by our walking taco in order to make a walking version of a pumpkin pie. This recipe is super easy. It requires no baking and almost no measuring. Plus all of the items that we're using, except for some of the optional ones like our whipped cream, are pantry staples, which means that they're going to be shelf stable and you can whip up this fall treat just about any time. So come along with me as we make a walking portable pumpkin pie. Let's get started by gathering our ingredients and our equipment. If you registered for this program, you're going to receive an ingredient bag, and that's going to have a packet of Jell-O, some evaporated milk, a can of pumpkin, and some kind of pre-made cookie. The ingredient bags are going to come with these Teddy Grahams to go, but we're going to come back to that in a second, because if you're making this along with us at home, you have a couple of different options as far as the prepared cookie that you're going to want to use. You may also would like some extra ingredients. This is just some pumpkin pie spice and some maple syrup. And then I also recommend, just for topping, some kind of either Cool Whip or whipped cream. So next, let's talk equipment. You're going to want a rubber spatula, a whisk, probably some kind of can opener. I like this kind. I just think they're a little easier to use. And definitely a mixing bowl. And then if you are using our optional ingredients, like our pumpkin pie spice and our maple syrup, you are also going to want a set of measuring spoons, which I don't have in front of me right now. And later, depending on the method you use for cookies, you might want either a wooden spoon or something with a strong bottom. And we'll talk about that method in a little bit. So the last thing you'll need is some kind of packaged cookie, but before you decide what kind you're going to buy, you must decide what kind of end result you're looking for in this dessert. To make this recipe as easy as possible, we've designed it to be a 1:1:1:1 ratio. But what that means is you're going to end up with a lot of filling, about 6 servings worth, I would say. One of the nice things about this recipe is that it's pretty versatile. So you can kind of stick with the down and dirty version that's the origin story, or you can scale it up to make it a real showstopper for your next family gathering. So depending on what you're picturing the end result being, that's going to help you determine what kind of cookies you want to buy. So the original recipe that I created was really based on that walking taco. So it's created to be made in and eaten out of a bag. Now, again, this original recipe I created for Teddy Grahams, but I've been finding that the bagged version of Teddy Grahams is a little bit harder to come by right now. A really nice substitute for that are these bags of mini Nilla wafers. This would be really easy to portion out for kids' parties or anything where you've got kind of a group event, because everyone can take their own bag, sort of get their scoop of filling and put whatever toppings they want on it and be on their way. So this is really great if you're looking for lots of people, minimal work, make it ahead of time. If you registered for an ingredient bag with the library, what you received is a Teddy Graham to go, but it's not in a bag, it's in a container. And these are nice because they're a little bit bigger, so you've got less of a portion ratio issue with your filling to graham cracker. And it comes with a lid, so these are really nice to take to work or to send to school, that kind of thing. And these two are going to be your portable options. They're not really pretty, but they are simple and they're easy to eat. Now with the holidays coming up, keep in mind what this recipe essentially is basically a giant icebox cake or trifle. So you can make it a beautiful trifle for your next dessert. And you kind of use up all that filling in one go. If you're going that route, you might want to buy a full-size regular box of Teddy Grahams or some other kind of crunchy, kind of dry cookie that's going to soak in all of that filling, like a Biscoff or a Ladyfinger kind of thing. That being said, I would not recommend using just kind of regular graham crackers, as those are going to get really soggy over time. And if you are making this dessert ahead and taking it somewhere, your graham crackers are probably going to disintegrate and there won't be a lot of integrity left to them by the time you're ready to eat. So what you want is the cookie to soften and kind of take in all the flavors without completely dissolving. If you choose to go in the bowl or trifle route, you can still make it portable and individualized if you use like mason jars, which are really cute and pretty, and they're a nice kind of hands-off treat as well. Or you can go with a more standard salad bowl or trifle bowl. Once you know your options and you decide what you're going to make, then you can choose what kind of cookie you will need. So for this video, I'm going to go ahead and make the bagged version, kind of the original version that I created. And then I'm also going to make a trifle version in a glass so that you can see all those layers as well, and we can get the most out of our filling. We will start by beating together our vanilla pudding mix and our evaporated milk in a large bowl until it's dissolved. Now we're using evaporated milk. This is not the same thing as sweetened condensed milk, which also comes in a can. Evaporated milk is just what it sounds like. It's milk that has had some of the water evaporated. It's a little bit kind of creamier texture. Basically, the reason that we're using evaporated milk today is that it's shelf stable, so we can do this right out of the cabinet. You can also make this with regular milk. And we'll talk about substitutions for that in just a minute. But let's go ahead and get started by beating those things together. We got our pudding mix. Didn't quite open that all the way. There we go, much better. All right. And I have shaken this up a little bit before I'm pouring it, but we're going to whisk it in a minute. So if you didn't do that step, don't worry about it. Make sure when you are pouring out of a can, you have at least 2 holes, one for the air to go in so that the other one helps the condensed milk, evaporated milk pour out. We're just going to beat that together until it's just dissolved. If you don't have evaporated milk on hand for this recipe, you can use regular milk, as I said. Just follow the instructions that are on the container of your pudding or pie filling mix. For the Jell-O brand, like we're using here, I believe that's 1 1/3 cups. That is dissolved. As you can see, it's pretty thin at this point. We are just going to set it in the fridge for about 5 minutes to set up, and then we're going to move on to our next step. All right, let's talk substitutions. According to their website, Jell-O Instant Pudding Mix does not contain any gluten, dairy, eggs, or gelatin, but it is not certified as gluten-free or vegan. So as always, be sure to check your ingredients if you have any allergies, dietary restrictions, or just preferences. So the only part of the filling that will be non-dairy is actually adding the dairy to it. So let's talk through a couple of options for non-dairy substitutes. If you are using a thinner milk replacement, such as almond milk, you're going to need to reduce the amount of liquid to about 1.5 cups And you should be aware that the set of your pudding and the final result of your filling is going to be much softer. But when we add the pumpkin puree back to it later, that should help with a little bit of the texture as well. Some excellent gluten-free shortbreads that would work really well for this. Or you could just skip the cookie altogether. Like a crunchy granola or toasted pecans or some other kind of nut would also be a nice crunch, but without adding any other kind of gluten element to it. I think this also makes a really excellent dessert on its own, just kind of like a pudding or a mousse. For those making a smaller portion of the actual walking pie and will have leftover filling, you can freeze it in molds and make pudding pops. My family used to do either Dixie cups or ice cube molds with toothpicks and popsicle sticks in them, and we would use them to make those pudding pops. And this recipe is a really great candidate for that. In addition, you can use this template to make all kinds of different treats throughout different seasons. For instance, this would be really great if instead of a vanilla pudding, you use like a no-bake cheesecake. You could do any kind of really cream pie filling will work for this recipe, so feel free to experiment. So those are just a couple of options for how you can adapt this recipe to be better for your preferences and your diet. Now that the pudding has been setting for about 5 minutes, we should be ready to move on to the next step. So we're going to go to filling part 2. All right, now that this is set up, you can see that it's a lot less liquidy than before. So we're going to go ahead and fold together our remaining filling ingredients. So to punch up the flavor a little bit, I'm going to add in a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice, all right, which is very popular around this time of year. I'm just going to do just about a teaspoon. All right, and this is an optional addition just to make it a little bit more flavorful. All right, and then I'm also going to add in a tablespoon of maple syrup. I just really like the depth of flavor that the maple syrup adds. I think it really complements these other autumn flavors that we're doing here. One of the earliest recorded recipes for pumpkin pie used molasses as a sweetener. So this is kind of a similar type where we're getting flavor from the sweetener itself in addition to the level of sweetness. All right, now the pudding mix does already have sugar in it. So adjust your recipe based on the level of sweetness that you like, or you can omit that maple syrup altogether. So once again, I used a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice and a tablespoon of maple syrup. All right, and now I'm going to add in our pumpkin. Now there's a famous scene from a popular TV show where the instruction fold it in trips up the characters and they just keep repeating, fold it in, just fold it in. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what folding is. All folding means is it's a fancy way of saying mixing something heavy, like our pumpkin puree, into something light, like our pudding mix here. In this case, the heavy, once again, is our pumpkin, and the light is our just set pudding. It's still got a little bit of lightness to it. Folding basically just indicates a more gentle type of stirring than, say, beating or even mixing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add our pumpkin puree. So this is not pumpkin pie filling. This is just pumpkin puree. This pumpkin pie filling will add additional sweetness, and since we already have sugar in our pudding mix and we're adding a little bit of maple syrup into it as well, that would be really sweet. And then of course our cookies also have some sugar. All right, so be sure just to use pumpkin puree. All right, so now that I've got my ingredients in there, I'm going to go ahead and fold it, and I'm going to use a figure 8 motion in order to incorporate my pumpkin into my pudding. Now, if you're doing folding for something like baking, it is more important to be really careful because you're using usually egg whites or something that's lighter for lift in your cakes. But since we are doing a no bake here, it's okay to overmix just a little bit. All right, so all I'm looking for is for it to be fully incorporated. So I'm using the rubber spatula for this, which is just helping me scrape down the sides as I go so that I don't leave anything behind. That's pretty close. We just want to make sure we don't leave any pockets where it's just pudding or just pumpkin pie. All right, that looks pretty incorporated. It's going to look like that. All right, and we're going to continue to let this set up for about 10 minutes. So we're going to pop this back in the fridge and then our filling will be complete. While we're waiting for that pudding to set in the fridge, we're going to go over some fridge fun facts. If you're looking for another interesting holiday dessert this season, look no further than this recipe from 1932. According to Smithsonian Magazine, Daisy Dean Doolin, the mother of Elmer Doolin, who was the founder of the Frito Company, came up with a Fritos fruitcake. Its ingredients included candied fruits, pecans, and crushed Fritos. Just in case you thought fruitcake couldn't get a worse reputation. I don't know about you, but I don't plan on taking this to any holiday parties this year. Let's take a walk through the history of the walking taco. The walking taco was actually only trademarked this year by the Frito-Lay company, but the recipe dates back much longer and is believed to have originated in Mexico, where the chips were originally produced. The first recorded recipe using the Frito brand chips is from 1949. However, it gained popularity throughout America in the 80s following their introduction at the 1982 World's Fair under the name Petros. Pop quiz. Which of the following ingredients is not typically used in pumpkin pie spice? Cinnamon, anise, nutmeg, cloves, or ginger? The answer is anise. Some blends will also include allspice and mace. Mace is another spice that comes from the nutmeg plant. We see mace used in an early recipe for pumpkin pie, originally published in 1796 by Amelia Simmons. It was called pumpkin pudding, and you can find that recipe right here. All right, with that, our filling should be set up and ready for assembly. So let's put our dessert together and enjoy. So I'm going to start with the bag method here, and I'm using the Nilla wafers. I'm just going to lightly crush these by hand before I open up the bag. That should give me some bite-sized pieces. And then I'm going to open this with scissors just so that I don't accidentally rip it down the center. Just to keep things a little bit more neat. All right, so I got my bag of crushed cookies. Now I'm going to go ahead and spoon in some of my filling right on top. And I'm going to top it with some whipped cream. All right. And that is going to be my walking pumpkin pie. So I can go ahead and eat it right out of the bag. I'm just going to get to the bottom so I get a little bit of everything. All right, walking pumpkin pie. It's not the prettiest dish, but it is still delicious. It's fun, it's festive, it's easy to make, and it makes me feel like a kid again. My favorite thing about the walking taco was it was just a break from the regular rules and eating conventions. It's only ever served at parties, and this feels like a party because the rules are a little bit different. All right, now that we've tried that one, there is something to be said for a more elegant dessert, so we're going to show you how to do that as a trifle. Let me set this aside. All right, and now we're gonna layer it up in this glass. So I have my graham crackers ready to go, or my Teddy Grahams, excuse me. All right. So I'm going for more layers on this one. With the bag, it was just cookies at the bottom, filling, and then topping. But I'm gonna kind of alternate here. All right. So I'm just gonna start with a handful. If you are going the trifle version, I recommend putting your cookies into a zip bag like this one and then kind of crushing them with a rolling pin so that you are ready to go on right away and that you have all of your material ready to go. But you can also do this method. So I'm just kind of crushing them a little bit by hand before I put them in there so that I get a good layer. And then if you have those Go packs that we showed you at the beginning, like what comes in the library ingredient bag, you can also use this method, which uses the back of the spoon we were showing you before, and just kind of crushes it up. Now for the trifle, this is only going to work for your bottom layer, which is why having your cookies lightly crushed ahead of time is a good idea. Now these Teddy Grahams are already pretty small and bite-sized. Same thing with the mini Nilla wafers, so I don't need them to be completely crushed. I just want them to be kind of spoon ready. Oh, I got one in there. Okay, my pieces are pretty even, so I'm gonna go ahead and make my trifle. All right, I got my cookie layer. I'm gonna do a layer of filling. Right. Now, if you really want like a nice clean version, you can use either a zip bag or a piping bag so that you can get your layers really even so you don't get any on the sides like I just did, if you really want to see really nice clean layers. You can also use a spoon or a rubber spatula to just kind of clean that up. All right, so I've got 2 layers to start. Then I'm gonna go in with a layer of whipped cream. And if you get a little on the side, you can always grab a towel, like a paper towel or something, and wipe them down as well. Layer of each so far. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna do a second layer of everything so that I get up to the top. So I've got my Teddy Grahams, another layer of my pumpkin pie filling. I do recommend either using hand whipped whipped cream or Cool Whip over the aerated kind, just because the aerated kind will lose air over time and it will flatten and it's going to make it harder to judge your layers. All right. And there we have it. We have a trifle version. Just as delicious, but a little bit prettier than eating straight out of the bag. So at this point, you can serve immediately and the cookies are still gonna have a little bit of crunch to them, or you can cover it in saran wrap, or if you're using a mason jar, you can tighten that up and stick it in the fridge and let the cookies continue to soften up. So let's review. Tonight we learned 3 methods for no-bake pumpkin pie desserts: the trifle, the bag, and the Go containers. We learned a little bit of history about the walking taco and pumpkin pies. So if you had a little bit of fun along the way, then we have met our 3 goals. We made something, we learned something, and we had some fun. If you make one of these desserts, please tag us in your photos and send us an email or fill out a survey to let us know what you thought. We have lots of other great videos on demand on our social media and YouTube pages, as well as our website. Be sure to check out Cooking with Kyra for more recipes, more geared towards kids, if you like recipes like this one from our new Lenox library. Thank you again for tuning in to Walking Pumpkin Pies with the new Lenox library, and we hope to see you again soon.